There are so many moments, for example, that you will find so annoying when you watch season 4, where the classic Joe thing of internal monologue has been like ridiculized and used to its optimal potential, to the point that he's having conversation with people without even moving his lips.
So is she actually shagging you, Phoebe, or are you more decorative? Is it true though? American men are better in bed, or is it only the Jewish ones? Having a laugh, please. Try and have a sense of humour at least, Jonathan. No, my ex is here.
No! God, please, no! No!
Welcome back to Torn Apart. Today we're going to be talking about You Season 4, and this is actually the second time that I record this video because the sound was not recording. So I've been talking for 40 minutes and I have to redo it all over again. I'm definitely going to forget some things and I'm definitely going to be incredibly annoyed. But anyway, so we're going to start by not spoiling things, and then I will give you a spoiler alert so that we can actually spoil things and actually break down every single episode one by one.
You steal my spotlight and I murder you. I just want my little European holiday back.
I couldn't get away.
So there are a lot of things that I like about You. I really like the characters, I really like the performances, but most of all I like the way that they always seem to address some kind of like modern problems. For example, the third season that came out in 2021 was really building on the idea of the pandemic, what people had been through, and also how it changed all the dynamics, how it created a little bit of paranoia, and how people just acted and perceived life in a completely different way. And it's the same thing when it comes to this fourth season here, when it comes to the Eat the Rich killer, when it comes to all the problems in between the different classes, when it comes to rich people living on a completely different planet than other people, and also with the idea of criticizing Emily in Paris, because I think that this season here is kind of like a better version of Emily in Paris, even though it is still a little bit stereotypical when it comes to how they represent London and the fact that Joe is like the biggest apartment ever, that it's not possible to get like on a professor's salary. Just saying.
All I can say is never again. No love. No people. Just books.
This season here feels very different from the other ones. It's a little bit more campy, and I'm pretty sure that it's gonna divide fans completely. But I think that if we look at who created this series, and if we look at how it started to diverge from the source material starting from season 2/3, then we understand why they're deciding to do it this way. First of all, who created this series? Greg Berlanti and Sera Gamble. Sera Gamble is mainly written like a lot of episodes of Supernatural, and she's also the executive producer of Supernatural, and Greg Berlanti is in charge of the Arrowverse. He created Arrow, created Supergirl, created Legends of Tomorrow, and all of that cringy CW stuff. So of course you understand why we're heading towards cringy things when it comes to You. It makes a lot of sense, right, when you look at these people's pedigree. But anyways, I still feel that You is well directed, well performed, and at the end of the day it keeps changing season from season, which is not something that happens with the source material. So the original source material was written by Caroline Kepnes, and there are 3 books with the 4th one that is coming out this year. And basically when it comes to the books, we almost like push the reset button on every single book for Joe to move to a different area and get obsessed by a different girl. That's at least what happens in the first 3 books. So You, Hidden Bodies, and You Love Me. And then the 4th one apparently is going to be called For You and You Only. So I do like the idea that they actually decided to go in a completely different directions when it comes to the TV series. For example, Love Queen was a fan favorite, mostly because it's Victoria Pedretti, incredible actress, incredible performance that we knew already from Haunting of Hill House, of course.
I need to point out that none of this would be happening if you hadn't grabbed a weapon.
Oh, wow.
No one will ever love you like I do, Joe.
But they decided to stick with her for a 3rd season, explore all the suburbia married life, and to give also Joe something different to deal with so that he could actually go through some character development. That's something that you can do with TV series, and sometimes you can also avoid when it comes to books, novels, and stuff like that. And it's something that I like, when books, movies, video games can all exist in their own separate universes, and they can exploit the different medias in different ways, so we can experience the the story differently. That was a lot of repetition, right? But I don't care, you know what I mean. Of course, we have Penn Badgley to thank when it comes to the main performance of Joe. He's incredible in the role. He's incredibly believable since the very first minute he came on screen. He has a very interesting voice as well. He reminds me of Dexter or even Hannibal in the way that his tone feels very hypnotic.
Hello? You? No, fuck, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not gonna try to figure out who you are, why you look so concerned about the state of that heirloom tomato.
So it makes a lot of sense that he's created such a huge fan base behind him who try to protect him, who try to defend him, and to try to make him feel like he's better than other serial killers, which is what he thinks about himself, of course. So it's interesting to think that with this 4th season here, for example, we have another killer who is trying to communicate with Joe, who is trying to create that classic relationship between investigator and serial killer, being like, you and I are the same, because he's trying to make friends because he actually feels really lonely. I like that kind of stuff mostly because we're seeing it from Joe's perspective, who feels above him at the end of the day. He feels like he's better than him because he doesn't kill, he protects, he defends, which is what the entire character of Joe is built around.
You want a friend. You want us to be the same kindred spirits. And if you think we are, maybe you'll want to take this IRL.
It kind of gives him an excuse to be almost like forgivable. We almost wish he could like go back and become a better person. But I feel like since the 3rd season, it's become really clear that he's a bit unredeemable. And I like the fact that in this 4th season, they moved completely away from the US. They went to Europe and they don't really try to immediately recreate a new obsession for him. This time around, it's the other person, the serial killer, who happens to be a guy as well, because Love, for example, was obsessed with Joe, but in a different way, who becomes obsessed with him and tries to communicate with him through different like serial killer games, basically. It's interesting, reminds me of Dexter, Hannibal, Silence of the Lambs, those kind of things. And I like that this series, even though it's not always good, even though it's getting really campy, at least it's evolving and treating new things and bringing characters into new environments, which is something that you can't say about a lot of different drama comedies shows. Every single season had their own version of an obsession for Joe, which came with a really good performance from an actress. In the 1st season, we had Beck, who was played by Elizabeth Lale, who still comes back and haunts him across the different seasons. In the 2nd season, we had Love, who was played by Victoria Pedretti, and we already said that she's amazing, so I don't need to repeat myself. But I wanted to say this mostly because it's really weird that she doesn't come back to haunt him as much as Beck does.
You don't need to run away.
Please, no.
Stop. You get...
Stop. Please stop.
And it's weird because Love was always considered to be like an equal to Joe in the way that they dealt things, in the way that they loved each other as well. It's kind of a missed opportunity to create kind of like a new situation where he wouldn't be seeing like the ghost of Love anymore. They would kind of criticize everything that he does and the way that he reacts. Maybe they like wanted to almost reboot the series completely, because this is what I was talking about when I said that a lot of people are not gonna like this season, because it almost feels like a completely different series starring Joe Goldberg, like Emily in Paris starring Joe Goldberg with like serial killer vibe, or like Glass Onion starring Joe Goldberg, because there is a lot of whodunit stuff going on. And I like the way that Joe, since he is a bookworm, he really loves books, of course, and he's become a professor in this universe here. He like criticizes the whodunits and he hates them so much because they're so formulaic. And it's really funny that he would say that, because serial killer stories are also incredibly formulaic. So his own story is formulaic, it's very repetitive in the same way that whodunit would be.
It's so dumb.
Oh, it's so dumb, it's brilliant.
No! It's just dumb.
Those are like the tiny things that I really enjoy. Also, all the commentary that they do about Gen Z, all the creepy stuff about him making a comment where Gen Z has suddenly become adults, and he says it in like a weird sexualizing, objectifying way. To come back to the actresses I was talking about before, in this 3rd season we had Tati Gabrielle. Her character was not that interesting. She was yet another like almost damsel in distress character that was kind of like a copy and paste version of Guinevere back then. But Tati Gabrielle really managed to make us hear about her, and she's the only character who kind of moves to season 4, and she's dealt with almost way too quickly. It's really weird in the way that this obsession like almost ends in like 1 or 2 episodes. This is like a main critique that I have. Too many things happening. In every single episode, there are too many things happening. They're always trying to create forced tension. There are so many plot twists. There are so many cliffhangers, which don't really behave like cliffhangers, just to create the sense of being in a whodunit thriller. And at the end of the day, it feels like the stakes are even lower just because it feels like they're trying too much. They're trying too hard, you know?
Shit. I'm in a whodunit, the lowest form of literature.
And this is kind of the limitation of trying to build like a weird whodunit structure to a season, and of course wanting it to split it in half because the second half is coming out on March 9th, and also the idea that you have to reintroduce a new life for Jonathan/Joe, and that at the end of the day he doesn't really have a lot of motivation for him to keep going with the investigation. The only thing is that he's being blackmailed into keeping this investigation going, but that is basically it. There are so many moments, for example, that you will find so annoying when you watch season 4, where the classic Joe thing of internal monologue has been like ridiculized and used to its optimal potential, to the point that he's having conversation with people without even moving his lips.
Don't know what I said either, but...
Oi! Where did you go?
Like, we already hear the answer that he wants to give them, but he doesn't end up giving that answer because we already know it, so he just... He does that. He does that quite often, and I hope I can find a clip of it and do a little bit of an experiment and take out all the internal monologues so that you can feel what it feels like to be in a conversation with Joe/Jonathan within this season.
I need some advice, and I heard you were married, right? I might propose to Phoebe.
Sorry, I didn't quite get that.
Just to say that they pushed the little quirky things that were really part of the You series a bit too far this season, just because they wanted to make it feel like a You season. And I still haven't finished my point about the actresses, but basically in season 4, so we have another obsession who becomes an obsession like throughout the episodes. At the beginning she's really not, but it's the character of Kate, who's played by Charlotte Ritchie, and she's technically like the perfect example of like what a girl boss character would be, and she does that for the entire 5 episodes, and it's incredibly annoying. Mostly because she doesn't really feel genuine, she doesn't really feel like a normal person, because they try to create like weird sexual and romantic tension with Joe, but at the same time she hates him, like she hates his guts so much to the point like when she sees him, it feels like she's about to throw up.
I would rather be cut up into 1,000 tiny pieces than spend another second alone with you.
That's what the performance is telling me anyways, and how am I supposed to be convinced that she would want to sleep with him anyways? A good way of creating that kind of like erratic character, you'd have to look at Fleabag. Fleabag, for example, that character there is a really good example of how to create a character that is like telling you one thing and doing completely the opposite, but it feels genuine. It doesn't feel like forced tension. But with Kate here, it feels like forced tension, because it feels like she's saying no when the plot wants her to say no, and she's saying yes when the plot tells her to say yes, so that Joe can do something wrong or act in a different way, and it can create like a lot of different complications at the end of the day.
What the fuck are you doing?
Saving her life so she can keep being rude to me.
Look, I'm sorry I was a dick before. Of course you want the police to just do their job.
I do really like the way that this show basically unravels and deconstructs a lot of ways that women are portrayed in the media. We had like things like the manic pixie girl thing, the girl boss thing when it comes to this season, also the cool girl type. Yeah, those are all things that You has going on for it, as well as a really interesting visual style, using a lot of anamorphic lenses, playing with a lot of different types of contrast, and also different like depth of field. Just to say that You at the end of the day still manages to feel fresh and still manages to attract your attention, even though it is a bit of a mess this season around, just because it felt like they wanted to do something different way too much.
If I'm honest, I'm tired. What I'd like is to just be done, you know? Not hurt anyone anymore.
So we're gonna be talking about all the 5 episodes that came out. So the episodes titles are Joe Takes a Holiday, Portrait of the Artist, Eat the Rich, Hempsey, and The Fox and the Hound. First of all, I found it incredibly weird how many times that Joe gets drunk in this season here, and when he wakes up, like weird things are happening, or just because he was drinking too much, weird things are gonna happen. It feels like a lesson that he should have learned like way earlier in the last seasons, and that they're just using it like as a cheap way of creating tension. There are so many things like that. As I was saying before, there's a lot of interesting cliffhangers in these episodes, but there is one that really pissed me off, and is a perfect example of creating forced tension. This happens at the end of episode 3, where basically Joe arrives at the club and then all of the rich people are looking at him. By the way, they don't have any interesting personality, so I don't remember their names. And the police like steps forwards and like, oh, we have a couple of questions for you. And everybody's looking at him being like, we know that you did the thing. And then at the beginning of the other episode, we realized that the police went there to just be like, oh, actually your alibi checks out. Everything you told us is the truth. Good job. Bye. That's it. That's what the cliffhanger was all about. And this was why I was saying that basically this season is kind of treating us like we're stupid. And we're not stupid, of course. There are so many things happening every single episode. It's both a good and a bad thing. The bad part is that very often, like when things happen, you end up being like, oh, Joe will manage to escape that. Joe will manage to get around that, because if you just look at what happened last episode, then you know. There is a really good example when the bodyguard attacks him and he kills him and disposes of his body in like 2 seconds, even though he's in a cemetery in central London and nobody sees him. Incredibly weird. There are so many moments where like people see him snooping around when there is no reason for them to see him snoop around, and so many moments where people should see him snoop around because it's incredibly obvious, and they don't do it. And the script just decides which is which whenever it is more convenient.
Malcolm knew about that. Hello, you nosy little fucker.
It's so incredibly weird because it could be so easily foreshadowed when Joe is about to get discovered or not, so that we understand that there are stakes to snooping around and acting in the way that Joe does. But if we always get surprised in the same way that he does, it feels incredibly weird. It feels like there is like an omniscient like camera looking at him, and they decide like when that camera is turned on and when people discover him, and create like weird tension and stuff like that, and when it doesn't happen. But at the end of the day, since there is no foreshadowing, we never know if it is or it's not happening, so we don't care. You know what I mean? This season also made me realize how every single season Joe has like a cute person that he needs to help out, and he kind of feeds his white savior complex. In the first season we had the child who was living next door to him. The second season we had the character played by Jenna Ortega. In the third season we had, well, Marianne technically, even though he ends up being obsessed with her. And in this season here we have his student.
Friends with Kate.
Hardly, but I'll figure it out.
I'll get the letter for you.
I don't know, I find it kind of interesting that they want to create that kind of character in every new environment that he's in, so that we realize that actually he's not that much of a bad guy, you know? Just because he's helping out like one person that one time, you know? It's just really funny. It's not a critique as much as it's a funny thing to notice, you know? The episode in the countryside was really enjoyable, mostly because it reminded me of Glass Onion and like Sherlock Holmes and those classic like mystery whodunit things. But at the end of the day, that episode really showed how they just don't know how to write it properly, because there are so many characters who clearly don't want Joe to be there, but they're not gonna say anything about it, or when they are, they're gonna act completely insane, being like, I mean, let's do it like back in the days, let's just kill him, let's just shoot him in the head. And this creates like a weird hunt going on in the woods later on, and then for them to be kidnapped by the killer themselves. Anyways, I'll address that later on. Just to say that they're not really acting in like human ways. I mean, I do understand that we are in England and people are incredibly socially awkward. They actually point that out in a really cool scene that I enjoyed.
Being around British people trying to feel feelings is creepy.
I'm sorry for your loss.
Really relatable, especially when it comes to people that I've met when I used to live in England. But at the same time, especially because English people tend to address their emotions in different ways, using sarcasm, using irony, using a lot of passive aggressiveness as well. So in one way, I understand why these rich people at the end of the day don't want to push him out of their friends group, because it would be too awkward. But at the same time, there are entitled, egotistic, rich people, and he's clearly like a lower class professor that they look down upon. around. It's just insane that they would keep him around for so long, episode after episode. And the weirdest thing is that he's not actually giving them reasons to keep him around. He's not bringing anything to the group.
Yes, thank goodness our dear old friend Jonathan is here.
You're fake, and you're calculated, and you're nosy, and you sabotage my relationship with Phoebe.
I have no desire to hear what you have to say, and frankly, I don't know why you've come.
Phoebe invited me.
It would have been so incredibly easy to force Joe to try and get along with these people, to try and actually be their friends and pretend to be their friends, and that would be the reason why they tried to keep him around. Even Phoebe, it's not really clear why she's so in love with Joe at the end of the day, and I wonder whether they actually ever reveal the thing that he said to her at the party while he was completely drunk, or if it's just a weird red herring that they're gonna be using like that for as long as possible, hoping that we forget about it. And of course, since these people also don't have a lot of personality and things going on with their life, we don't really care about them as well. We don't really care when they die, for example, and it's a bit of a shame. Even though I do like the idea of creating the Eat the Rich character and working on those themes for this season here, it's very modern. It reminds me of things that I saw last year, Glass Onion, Triangle of Sadness, Parasite a couple of years ago, of course, as well. So it is very modern, it's very contemporary, and this is why this season works well at the end of the day, even though it has a lot of flaws.
Great bed for shagging. Shame that won't be happening.
Oh, snap!
There is this moment where in the second or first episode, it happens very quickly. We realize that the father of Love has hired a killer to kill Joe. We have no idea how we found out that Joe was actually alive. That is just put under the rag as fast as possible. But the killer is in a weird mood. He goes to Joe and he's like, can't be bothered to do this today. Here is a new identity. Go live your life somewhere else. The only thing you have to do is kill Marianne. And he just takes a picture of the locket that he steals from Marianne and he sends it to him. And the killer is immediately like, okay, fair enough, he must have killed her. Even though he knows that Joe is a stalker who stalks people and it would be so easy to steal something instead of killing. But anyways, and that plotline completely disappears in the first 2 episodes. Same goes for Marianne. So incredibly obsessed with her, disappears after the second episode. It's interesting, of course, that this time around the killer is obsessed with Joe. So it's not Joe who is obsessed with someone. It's just that because of the blackmail thing, because of other reasons, he's kind of forced to care about these people that he doesn't care for at all, to try and save them, to try and protect them. So it is an interesting way of exploiting that character trait that he has, but they're pushing it too hard. It's just weird, it's just unrealistic. It's kind of like they just looked at the Emily in Paris script like that and they were just like, okay, let's change a couple of things, and they turned it into a whodunit, putting some glass onion spices in it, and they created a new season like that. It's just weird. Let's talk about the reveal, right? Rhys is the serial killer, even though Roald could have been the serial killer as well, because he was incredibly creepy, really vengeful, obsessive, jealous, and that kind of stuff. I saw that coming really from a mile away, because Rhys seemed to be the only normal person. He was also the only character that he had actual conversations with, so it makes sense to have him be the serial killer.
Simon tore through people like Christmas presents. They'd love enemies. Nothing I could prove, but
maybe karma caught up to him.
Because if it was anyone else, we would not have cared at all, because we didn't get to actually spend time with them, actually know them, Actually, no, yeah, we did spend time with them. It just was incredibly empty time spent with Joe's internal monologue and not knowing these people, which is a bit of a shame, I think. But anyways, Rhys ends up, kidnapping those 2 people, putting them in the basement and stuff like that. And it's really interesting because Joe is trying to manipulate him into thinking that they're the same, they feel the same things when they're killing people and stuff like that. But Rhys is not falling for it, and now he's running for mayor. So they're really pushing all the political and class stuff as much as possible in this second half of the season. We'll see how it unfolds. I enjoyed it mostly because it was doing something different, especially when we are in a 4th season. They try to do something different. I always appreciate more than people trying to recreate the same things over and over again. But I feel like a lot of people are gonna hate it for exactly all the different reasons that I talked about today. But anyways, let's try to guess what is going to happen in the next few episodes, right? We already have the titles, so the titles are Episode 6, Best of Friends, Episode 7, Good Man, Cruel World, Episode 8, Where Are You Going, Where Have You Been, Episode 9, She's Not Here, and Episode 10, The Death of Jonathan Moore. I suppose that every single episode is going to pack a lot of narrative, like plot twists and stuff like that. It would be interesting if this got political to the point that it becomes really hard to access Rhys, the serial killer, because he's running for mayor. Maybe he has a lot of media attention and stuff like that. That would be a good angle to explore this, especially because we've explored the old trying to infiltrate like the rich people group way too much. We can't keep doing it like on every single episode, and we can't keep like playing that will they won't they thing with Kate anymore. I feel like when he's at the apartment and he just refuses to go take a pint with her, that should be like almost an end to their romantic relationship. Of course they should still like talk to each other and be part of each other's lives, but I don't want this will they won't they thing to keep going because it feels incredibly like forced. It would be interesting actually if Joe didn't have any like romantic obsession in this season, and this could have been like an interesting way of leading towards a final season where either he gets better or for some reason he gets way worse, you know? So this season would have been almost like the season where he doesn't masturbate, you know what I mean? Like the season where like he almost doesn't have any sexuality. It would have been interesting, and we had the opportunity of doing that mostly because Kate didn't seem to like him at all and no one else had enough personality to want to sleep with him. Plus he refuses most people. Joe refused Phoebe, for example, when she was trying to have sex with him.
Oh no, is this a seduction?
It's very...
Sex robot Marie Antoinette.
Nice.
I mean, the death of Jonathan Moore, what does it mean? For me, it means that the personality / the identity of Jonathan will just disappear and Joe will have to do something completely different somewhere else. Probably go back to the States or something like that. I would not imagine like a 5th season that takes place in a different part of the world, like going to Japan, for example, or something like that. Like it cannot turn into like Emily in Paris, like Emily in Traveling, you know what I mean?
Come on, vamonos. Everybody, let's go.
Come on, let's get to it. I know that
It would just be too weird. It would go too far from all the things that were established in the previous seasons. But this is not the final season because Netflix otherwise would have said so. So it means that there is something after Jonathan Moore, and I wonder if it's going to be related to Marianne at all. I really hope that in the next few episodes they just don't address the Marianne thing at all, just because it feels interesting for his character not to do it, to like finish with his obsession with the other serial killer and then maybe to realize that, oh, I have Marianne to care for, you know, that kind of stuff. But anyways, those are all the thoughts that I had when it comes to season 4 part 1. Let me know down in the comments what you thought of this season, if you're a fan or not, hated it completely, if you liked the campy aspect, and if you're an Englishman, then let me know. Did you enjoy the way that they portrayed London and the upper higher class, the Tories basically? Let me know.
I reckon I might have been a hound in a past life, because I can smell you now. That same peasant stench I got a whiff of when we first met.
Anyways, don't forget to like and subscribe. Every single like that you drop will increase the chances that maybe Joe will move to Paris just for a weekend so he can find Emily in Paris and make her disappear. Kidnap her, lock her in a basement, in a cage made of glass, who cares? As long as we don't get another season of Emily in Paris. Fuck that show. As someone who lives in Paris, I am incredibly insulted by that series. Yeah, I said it. I'm Patrick, and this is Torn Apart.
Surprised I can read or something? Why are you staring at them?
No. Look, as much as I love sarcastic banter with faux polite American egotists.
Egotist? You think you're just getting started. But you're wrong. Because I'm gonna stop you.